Let's call to order this Tuesday, June 20th, 2023 meeting of the Knox County Audit Committee. And Kim, if you could call the roll, please.
Jim Morrison.
Here.
Matthew Warren.
Here.
Commissioner Baylor.
Here.
Commissioner Jay. Commissioner Schoonmaker.
Here.
All 5 members are present.
Commissioner Beeler, could you lead us in the pledge, please, sir?
Certainly will. Please stand, salute the flag, and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. For the minutes of our last month meeting, which would have been the May 22nd meeting, could we have a motion and a second to approve those, please? Got a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right. All in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Item 5 on the agenda is Finance Department. Chris, that's you, I believe, sir.
Good afternoon. You were emailed the monthly financial update that runs through the end of April. I'll just go through some highlights on this, then answer any of your questions. Going to page 4 on the document. General fund revenue year to date compared to the same time of a year ago, we're about $11 million ahead of where we were a year ago in revenue. Expenditures is about $1.5 million ahead of where we were a year ago. So you can see total about $9.5 million ahead of where we were a year ago, just related to the general fund. I won't really touch too much on schools, as I know that Chris Simons will give that report, so I won't touch on that too much. Everything else is in line. If there's a difference, there's a timing issue, like debt service was $20 million ahead of where it was a year ago on revenue. That has to do with timing of the school payment related to debt. And so everything through April trending in a positive direction, and so nothing that is really that is negative. If you go to the next page, which technically
Could I
is
ask
page,
a question?
Yep.
On the hotel motel fund, we're almost, the actual year to date is almost to what the annual budget is. What do you expect by the next 2 months?
Sure.
Revenues to be?
Yeah, 2 months, and we accrue back 2 months. So we think we're going to exceed about $13 million in revenue on hotel motel tax fund, and so we are averaging probably a little over $1.1 million per month, and so and it hasn't slowed down, and a lot of that has to do with average daily room rate being high and occupancy rates staying around 70%, and so that continues to be a positive, and we'll touch on that a little bit more in the back too, about how we compare to budget and things like that.
And the debt service fund?
Yes, debt service fund is more of just a timing issue. So ultimately for us, it was the payment from schools on the revenue side, and on the payout side has to do with I think going ahead and paying out the swaps. You turn the page, it's a sales tax analysis. This is kind of intriguing. You see a 5-year average in FY23 of where we are, a little about on the same path, but sales tax is still in a really good spot. Going to page 6, this just looks at the general fund sales tax. So the composite trend you'll notice through collections of March, we're showing a composite trend of $1.7 million ahead of budget, budget being $12 million. Our budget for FY24 is $13.5 million. So while that is important, you see if we were to end the year with that composite number of 1.7, our collections would be about 13.7. We have a budget of 13.5 for FY24. So we knew that when we budgeted for 24, we're budgeting fairly flat based on the report from the Boyd Center at UT. And you can go to the next page. Page 7 is the same report, but just for general purpose schools as it relates to local option sales tax. You'll see that they're about 9.4 million ahead on the composite trend. The numbers that Chris will show vary a little bit because we have we kind of look at it a little differently. Ultimately, though, the budget for FY23 was a little shy of 220.6 million. They're on track to get to a little over 229. The budget for 24 is 225.7. So they're ahead of where we had budgeted for 24. And engineering and public works, kind of the same thing. You see a $1.2 million composite trend through March collections with a budget in 23 of 8.6. We think we'll get in closer to 9.8, and 9.8 is what we budgeted for in 24. So as from a sales tax standpoint, as the commission probably saw what I sent out in the last week about, we are seeing kind of a flattening of sales tax, and we're not seeing the growth that we saw, but it's still ahead of where we thought we would be, and so that's a positive thing. Let's go on to page 11, and I'm going to just do this one page on property tax because they're all three would be the same from this standpoint. If you look at FY22 collections through April, in FY22 we'd have been at 117.1 through April. Thus far to date for us, we're at 121.5, so we're $4.4 million ahead of where we were a year ago in current property tax collections through April. That's 3.78% ahead of where we were a year ago. And so if you project that out, we would end the year at about 123 total, which is about 1.885 per penny. We budgeted in 24 for 124,184,000, which per penny was $1,903,500 per penny. So how we are growing on current property taxes, we would be less than 1% growth to hit our budget for 24 from where we are in 23. So our numbers for current property taxes probably shows the biggest growth that we've ever saw year to year in current property taxes. Now that can be attributed to a couple of things. One, of course, would be people moving here and things like that. Ultimately, what also impacts that is reappraisal. So you do get to capture growth on reappraisal, and it's hard to factor that in, so we try to factor that in. But property tax is really in a good spot for us, and we'll easily, as you can see, we've already beat budget year to date, and we'll be almost, as we end this fiscal year, we'll almost be where we were for budget of 24. Page 14 is the hotel motel tax fund, and Commissioner Schoonmaker had touched on this a minute ago. So just to give you an idea of where we are, you look at collections through March, we were at about $4.5 million ahead of budget, and so budget being $9 million. So we're at that number. It puts us at closer to 13.5 million collections for FY23. Our budget for 24 is 10.5. we take a conservative approach on this fund. But on the left-hand column, you can see from July through March, as far as collections months received would be September through May. You can see there's only 2 months in there where it's below $1 million per month. And one's close, one's 944. And both of those months were 5, 6, 8% ahead of where they were the previous year. So continue to see growth in this fund, and we're in a really good spot. To Commissioner Schoonmaker's point, basically with 3 months to go, we've already hit our budget number. Well, not final page, but next to the last page, the wheel tax report, if you look. April to April, we're 471,000 ahead of where we were a year ago, which is 3.88% up. And so that would project us to end this year at about 15.4 million on wheel tax. We were down in April by 156,000 month to month, but year to date we're still to the good, almost $500,000. Next page are court
Can I
revenues.
just ask a
Yeah,
quick
go ahead.
question from my colleague
Yeah.
from the clerk's office? Is there a reason that you think that the wheel tax was down 150,000 for April? Is there any overriding, I mean, other than the states not collecting their share, but
They're not, but that really wouldn't affect us. It could just be because of vehicle sales being down with interest rates being really high on vehicles. I mean, they've gone up quite a bit. I don't really know.
And it could be timing too. I mean, sometimes,
Yeah.
I mean, as we know, some people pay late because they forget that
Sure.
they're due. That's me.
I know we haven't looked at our April numbers and said, wow, that's really down, so I'm not sure. I can certainly look into it, though.
I think there's a lot of factors. Could be, to his point, car sales and interest rates could be part of that. It could be just timing of when people pay. And then there could have been something a year ago in April that made people pay more than something else. But page 16, court.
Hey, I have one
Yep.
question. Richie, if you have wheel taxes to be applied to, if you have 2 cars, 3 cars, is applied to all of them? If one of mine does and one of them doesn't, is it maybe because I didn't buy it in Knox County?
Yeah, if it was registered outside Knox County, it definitely wouldn't have the same.
So it never get.
It will once you do it here, yes.
Yeah.
You want to check on that?
You know, the total is different in every county, really, because some counties have a big wheel tax, some have a middle-sized wheel tax, and some have none.
Mine was out of state. So, okay. All right. Sorry, Chris.
Well, you're good. Court revenue, you will see all 3 here. So you will see a decrease in the Chancery and Probate Court. Some of that has to do with an issue that the Finance Department has been helping them on from a reconciliation standpoint, and there are some process things that internal audit's helping on. So some of that could be more of a timing thing and can work itself out. You'll see that at criminal sessions, about 346,000 ahead of where they were a year ago through April, and circuit and civil is about 85,000 of where they were through a year ago. And so that's the report. I'll answer any questions that you may have.
Just generally speaking, except maybe for the courts, it seems like most things are up. I won't say substantially, but over budget. And I'm wondering if for the 24 budgets, if y'all tried to level that a little more, or get it a little tighter, or you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, your point is revenues are exceeding the budgets on 23, and so
Right.
we did push those in 24, and even with the amendment that we brought, a lot of that was timing. So the more months we can get under our belt to see how things are going, I had brought up the point that, I may get this wrong now, but 80% of business tax is collected after April. And so after we prepare a budget, 80% of the business tax is collected. So how comfortable are you when you're projecting that number out, when you're setting on 10% collections? It's tough. And we tend to take more of a conservative approach on things. And so as we got more data in, we were more comfortable in pushing that number. Same thing a little bit with interest income. Interest from our banking contract is really good. We're comfortable with pushing that a little bit, but not a great deal, because ultimately the feds are going to lower interest rates, which will lower that number back down. But just so the members of the committee that wasn't at that meeting, our banking contract is Fed funds plus 15. And so currently the last 3 months, we've been getting over $1 million a month from our banking interest revenue. They probably regret that contract, but good for us right now. But I don't want to budget $10 million for interest, knowing that eventually the feds are going to lower that number. So we pushed it a little bit. We pushed it up to $5 million, which is probably a comfortable number. And then we can lower that steadily as the Fed does. And so to answer your question, yeah, I think what you will see in 24 is because we pushed revenues to get to that budget number. And if the Boyd Center's right and economists are right, and the economy continues to slow and we see basically a flattening of revenue, then I think as we get to this time a year from now and we're talking about budget surplus, that number will be fairly small,
Okay,
because we pushed already.
I'm just remembering back to when COVID hit and we did all our budgeting and we missed it because things turned out a lot. We were overly conservative, and I don't know that we're still, so we had a magnitude of order of being over budget in revenues in a lot of places. And I don't know whatever that percentage was. It seems like we're still a higher over budget. I don't know if it's as proportionate to what we experienced right after COVID.
I think it varies by revenue type. The one part that is hard to budget for is anytime you go through a reappraisal and you're trying to capture that growth, because you get to pull your growth out before you reset that rate. And what number are you comfortable with, right, with that number? And, the assessor would tell us that we think that growth number is 4 to 5 million. It's a good number. We're comfortable with that. Do we want to try to capture all of that? Probably not. And so from the standpoint of, we probably take a more conservative approach when it comes to reappraisal, just to see how that plays out.
Okay, and I may look at that a little more. Commissioner Schoonmaker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris, since we're about 6 weeks out from when the state is going to forego collection of food sales tax, have they given you any guidance how that's going to be handled for the counties?
Yeah, Perry talks to them daily. No. No, I think ultimately what we were told when they talked about this a year ago and what we were told briefly this year is we're going to make you whole, and they determine how they're going to make you whole. So I think they're going to base it off what you received from the previous month with maybe some growth to that, but I don't think they ever really came back to us and told us how that formula worked. But technically, we never saw a dip. We kept on seeing increases. So, yeah, to your point, they're going to do 3 months this year, I think.
Yes.
And so we will be made whole. Now, to your point, we could be better off with that, or we could be worse off. They're going to make an analytical decision on what they think that should be.
So they're not going to take the actual food purchases that were done in Knox County and tabulate what our amount of sales tax we would have gotten off of that.
That'd be one way to keep us whole.
I mean, they could do that.
Since it's all coded,
I mean, they could. ultimately, and the state don't share a lot of things, right? So,
Yeah.
No, you mean the Department of Revenue doesn't share
yes,
that.
and so, that's what, yeah, and so, I know businesses turn that in, so maybe they try to back into that number. Do they still make businesses turn it in? I don't know. It's a good question. I just know that they say, here's your number, and we just kind of go with it.
Any other questions for Chris? All right, thank you, sir. Now we are up to Ron McPherson, I think, has dodged this meeting. So, Chris, I guess that's you. And I think Ron had presumed that a lot of the statements, April statements y'all had, were presented at the Finance Committee. But I think, if I understand right, maybe the Finance Committee got submarined a little bit. I think they spent most time on budget, and I don't know that they really went over, according to my expert here, that they really went over your all schedules in that meeting. So, for whatever that's worth.
Chris Simons, Knox County Schools. Yeah, like Jim had mentioned there, Ron had sent an email last week, last Tuesday, that had some Q3 summary and financial update, and we also had like a one-pager that just kind of had some favorable conditions and some area of concern and trends to watch, like what we're internally looking at, and then we also had a budget summary, our fiscal year 23 budget and the changes to revenue and expenses and how that affected 24 budget. So I'd be glad to answer any questions. I can give some high-level, things as far as, like Chris had already mentioned, sales tax is positive. We should contribute to fund balance at the end this year again. We're in a good position as far as fund balance goes. Our actual to budget percentages are consistent with prior year. A few things that we're kind of watching out for and have some concerns on is obviously this new TISA formula and how that's going to affect us. We have all the influx of money this coming year, and then it's going to be a very small amount in the future years, and then obviously ESSER dollars are soon to roll off. And then the economy, we're heavily driven by sales tax, as you all know, so that's kind of where we're at as a school district, and obviously I'm sure a lot of you've dealt with the budgets and stuff like that already, so I won't harp on all that, but I'm glad to take any type of questions you all may have.
So the one schedule that we frequently see is the actual through March financial summary, and then you've got a summary on the proposal for 24. So the other sheet, is that, and I think that's what you were speaking to a little bit of.
Yeah, that summary there.
The actuals as sort of compared to the budget for next year.
What's that now? Sorry, I can't remember.
Well, I assume you're comparing a little bit why, like 23 budget, 23 actual, along with 24 budget.
Correct.
I guess that's what this is trying to explain.
Yeah, the little one-sheeter has the actual. That's obviously just
Right.
comparing the budget to actual for fiscal year 23, and it's very consistent with fiscal year 22 as far as this is at the end of
This
quarter
one called
three.
the
so the end of
summary
March.
sheet.
Oh yeah, the summary sheet. Is that the budget summary sheet you're looking at there?
I believe so.
Oh yeah.
Well,
So
there's a budget proposal summary.
yes.
And so really the one I was talking about, I assume talked a little bit about the 24 budget compared to the 23 actual and how those affected any changes or ups and downs you made.
Right.
In the 24 budget. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, like that budget proposal summary is basically taking, hey, here's our 23 budget, and then here's all the, our net revenue increases, state, local, indirect costs, and then our expenditures, all the aspects that that got approved in the budget as far, tried to break down each of the sections of the expenditure budget that made up that additional revenue that we brought on this year, or this upcoming year, or we're projecting to bring on.
So so you're saying the fund balance it's going up, am I seeing that by 13%?
Yeah, we think at the end of the year, we'll be sitting around 13% of our fiscal year 20 proposed budget. I think that's unassigned fund balance that we project we'll be sitting at the end of this year. So
Okay.
around like 80-ish million is what we're thinking, which is probably around 2 months of payroll for us. And it's also above the GFOA 10% threshold as well.
Okay, and I see your percentages aren't changing that much from 23 to 22. Okay, I think I understand everything. I had assumed this had maybe been gone over a little more in the Finance Committee, but again, I think that got torpedoed a little bit with budget discussion. So, does anybody else have any questions on the school items? All right, Chris, thanks a lot.
All right, thank you.
And item 7 is, that's going to be from our external auditor with Ted Hotes.
Good afternoon. Ted Hotes, Pew CPAs, Knoxville, Tennessee. Primary matter I'm going to go over today is what we consider our governance letter at the planning stage, four-page letter, which covers a few key topics, including communication, independence, the audit planning stage, concept of materiality, and our approach to internal control and compliance relevant to the audit. Specifically, this covers our audit for Knox County government and for Knox County schools, especially the central office. But beginning with communication, effective two-way communication between the firm and the audit committee and senior management is critical for an effective audit. We expect that you will timely communicate to us. By you, I mean the audit committee and senior management, especially senior management. Expect that communicate timely any matters that you consider relevant to the audit. We can always determine whether they're relevant or not. We would rather know of issues than not be aware of issues so that we can evaluate accordingly. Our obligation regarding communication is that we will timely communicate to you any potential fraud involving senior management or known or likely fraud, non-compliance with laws, regulations, or abuse that is material to the financial statements. Now, those items we're expected to communicate immediately, and we also are expected to communicate them immediately to the state of Tennessee. Other matters arising from our audit will be communicated to you in writing around the conclusion of the audit, and we typically will go over them, after the audit's done, shortly in the beginning of the new year. But communication is important for all parties, and we put an emphasis on communication with audit committee, with senior management, with internal audit, and we have open lines of communication, which I think is critical for any audit. Independence, there are shared responsibilities for independence. Our responsibilities include following AICPA and GAO as government auditing office, it's a federal office oversight, but we have to follow their independence rules, and in particular regarding providing non-attest services. Now, there's few non-attest services that we assist with this audit because, like, one of the main ones would be making journal entries or drafting financial statements, but we're not required to do that here since Knox County Finance drafts this financial statements. And then maintaining a system of quality control over compliance with independence rules and firm policies. Organization responsibilities are really both of our responsibilities here. I'll focus on the last two, not entering into arrangements of non-audit services, resulting in the firm being involved in making management decisions on behalf of the county. As auditors, we absolutely cannot make management decisions for the county because if we're making management decisions, then it's kind of hard to be independent and conduct an audit. We are allowed to be consulted. We are not allowed to make decisions. And not entering any relationships regarding the firm-covered people, relatives basically of key personnel, or any of us serving in a financial capacity or compliance capacity for Knox County. Audit planning process, planning is really important, and we're working on the planning stage right now because in order to audit, we need to understand how the entity, how the county operates, how the schools operate. As part of gaining our understanding, we'll obtain an understanding of internal control. We'll use this understanding to identify risk both material misstatement, basically all the financial statements accurate, and compliance, because we are also doing an audit of compliance both with laws and regulations and also compliance with grant requirements, because we will select some federal grants and be required to test for specific procedures. And we use this understanding really as a basis for designing and implementing our testing. On the next page, materiality, concept of materiality is also important in planning and executing the audit. We apply materiality in planning it and executing the audit. We'll accumulate any misstatements, and we will, if significant, we will report them. Obviously, we will find some misstatements that are trivial. $1,000 to the Knox County is not significant. Assuming that it's just an accounting error. Now, obviously, if it was fraud, that's a different matter. But an accounting error of $1,000 does not change anybody's opinion of how accurate the county's financial statements are. Just use that as an example. Skipping down our approach to internal control and compliance. Again, it's important that we gain an understanding of internal control so that we can plan the audit, determine the nature, timing, extent of audit procedures to be performed. We'll issue reports on internal control. They're in the reports in the back of the compliance report that we look at upon completion of the audit. And there's also a separate compliance report on compliance with laws and regulations. So we will address both of them in a reporting fashion. A section here on use of work of internal auditors. We generally do not use internal audit work, but we regularly communicate with internal audit. We share matters that we find, and Andrea shares matters that they're addressing. And we try to work together, because if there are areas internal audit has a concern with, then they obviously would have a concern to our financial audit. And I know often items that we find in the course of our audit, triggers deeper reviews by internal audit at a later point in time. So again, comes back to communication, and we communicate with internal audit just like we communicate with the finance department. Timing of the audit, we're basically in the early stages of the audit. With that in mind, I'll give an audit update for a moment. We have started our preliminary work for Knox County, focus on internal control testing and focus on federal grant testing. So those steps are in progress, and they include schools, internal controls, and certainly federal grants related to the schools. As an aside, we have also started our audit of the internal school funds, whereas our work on Knox County and Knox County School Central Office, we're really in the interim stage or first stage. We are in the primary stage for the internal school funds, because we typically perform 95% of our testing for the schools by early August. So that, then we're wrapping it all up, communicating. There's still a lot of work to do after that point, but the bulk of our testing is done by early August. Are there any questions regarding this letter?
On the internal control testing, I think you said you're all doing some of that now, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and do you look to see if any of those internal controls have changed since prior year? Or
Yes, most definitely. One of the key things that we evaluate is what has changed from one year to the next, because typically, well, a couple things. One, if there are changes, we want to make sure that the changes, what's been communicated to us as a change, is actually
right.
operating as designed, as prescribed. And then, as well, if there are areas that we have seen no change in a long period of time, we're looking to see whether, maybe they should change a little bit.
What do you look at when you're comparing this? I know we have internal control manuals, I guess I would say several of them throughout Knox County. If you go from that, or if it's more from, your prior year experience.
The real focus is we first gain understanding. That's really done by inquiry, and then we select tests to basically test different attributes and see whether, the steps that they say in place are actually in place.
Okay. Okay, and it's
And that's in areas of cash disbursements, cash receipts, payroll, for
that would
instance.
come from your probably from prior questionnaires and follow up to anything that would change those.
Yeah. We will, questionnaire type is the start, but we will actually test a few procedures to make sure that they're operating accordingly. And I guess one step further is that we also take an independent look at different departments, and each year we will select a few specific transactions from a selected department, especially ones that are off-site and might be subject to lesser controls.
Okay. All right, well, yeah, I was curious as to the awareness of the internal controls, assuming that there would be the testing of them once you find out if there are any changes, additions, or whatever. So
Yes.
that's good. I appreciate that.
Okay.
And I think Commissioner Schoonmaker has a question.
Yeah, this is not related to the governance letter, but I was just wondering, since their contract renewal is on our agenda this evening, would it be good to have a resolution or a motion and a second from the Audit Committee recommending approval of their contract extension?
I thought we did that at our special meeting last month.
Well, that's what I'm trying to remember, because we have it on our agenda as coming from the Audit Committee, but I'm just wondering,
Let me see what.
and we may not need to do that. I was just
I was thinking
thinking of a positive on their behalf.
I was thinking we wanted to do that last month so we could put it on your all's agenda for this month. And
Okay, all right.
was before the audit committee. Let's see, Commissioner Schoonmaker moved to approve the annual renewal, and Mr. Warren seconded the motion, and it was carried 3-0 to 2. I didn't know we had two people. I guess Beeler and Jay were absent from the meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, so
So I didn't know.
I think so. Then
Just-
we've already done that.
Okay. Thank you.
Ted, is that your understanding?
Yes.
Okay. But that was a month ago. It's a long time ago. All right, any other questions? Thank you, Ted.
Thank you.
And Andrea, now you're up, and I don't know how are you going to torture Mr. Morgan back there with anything, or is he just here to help you out?
He's just, I may have him talk a little bit about, when we get to the sheriff's office inventory, just to kind of give an idea of what exactly we're looking at
Okay,
on
good.
that one.
Good.
So I'll start with hotline, and we started our beginning caseload from March was 2. We closed both of those. And I just want to give a little context into both of those. They both were considered fraud cases. And one of those, if you remember, was the state was determining if they were going to investigate or not, and they have picked up that investigation. So I have transitioned. I'm working with the state. I've transitioned them. I'm following up as needed with them when they have questions for.
Have they had any questions for you yet?
Yeah, I've met with them and then done some additional gathering of information for them, just because it's a little easier. If I get it, I already know who to go to. So they've asked me to gather a little bit extra for them.
And I assume they're looking more at the issue itself rather than, I think we took some, I won't call it corrective action, but
Yes.
made some personnel reassignments or committee.
Yeah,
So-
the counties resolve this issue from our standpoint,
Okay.
but whenever we find something that looks like it could be more than what we can see, we are legally required to turn it over to the state. And so we had worked with Chris and Ted very closely on this one to make sure everyone that needed to know was apprised of it. As you saw, there was an issue in the external audit report, the auditor's letter from Ted's office from Pew about an issue that was picked up by the county that we investigated, we identified, we investigated. The state has decided to look into that more. So we will be assisting them as needed. It's taken a little time of getting that transition to them and making sure they have all the information and answering their questions. They will do their own analysis, and they may expand it beyond the scope
Right.
of what we looked at.
And
even.
is that one of your two closed cases? You're
Yeah,
considering it closed because it's moved over to them?
Right. I had it as awaiting management response, and we were going to close it. I was like, if they haven't told me by March, the end of March, I'm going to close it. And it was March 29th when they decided. So, so we worked with them in April and May to get that transitioned over. They have the files. They're looking into it, and now I'm just kind of helping them as they need it. And after we had the initial talk and transfer and walked them through what needed to be done. And so we spent about half a day together going over that project. So there may be additional work they ask our office to help them with. So if there is, we'll let y'all know. The other case was an internal tip. They originally asked us to look at about 2.5 years of data. After we did that, they had some additional concerns and asked us to go back 10 more years on that one. So we looked at 10 more years of data on that one, and that issue has also been resolved by the county. And if we want to talk about those, we can go into executive session if you need more details about those. So those are both wrapped up. They were just a little time intensive because there was a lot of data analysis and transitioning over to those. But those are both issues that were addressed and handled by the county. So often we have referred to other resources or training required. These are things the county actually did management action on.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Jay, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually would, Mr. Law Director, what are the circumstances in which we can learn more about this in executive session? Because I would like to hear more details, but I want to know when it's appropriate, and do we do it
Well,
after this meeting or what?
If there's any personnel or fraud issues there, we can go into executive session. It's not a public meeting issue. It's not an open meeting thing or
Is that something I need to ask for in a motion, get approved, and then put it at the end of our agenda? What is the process?
It's usually put at the end of the agenda by the chairman about,
We have that option at the
We
end
have
of the
that
agenda.
option.
This one's confusing me a little bit because I know some action was taken by county commission.
I'm just asking, is that something I need to formally ask for a
Right.
vote on to trigger it at the end of this meeting? Or is that just something that I can ask for right now and just say,
you can ask for
At
it.
your-
Sure.
We, like we did last time, we can go upstairs and probably get in the
Okay.
mayor's conference room.
I'd like to ask for it when we're done.
Okay, so we'll cover that under item 11.
Yeah.
And I'm all for doing that right now unless y'all have some conflict that would keep you from being able to do it right now after we finish this. But continue on.
Okay. So that wraps up the hotline side, because those were just two very in-depth things that actually, though our work helped the county may go in a direction with those items. On our status update, I really want to talk about first, on page 2 is our peer review. That's probably the biggest thing that's happened in our office since our last audit committee meeting, and it's on the second page because it's not something that we did, it's something that somebody completed on our behalf or, measured our compliance with, but I really want to talk about the peer review for a second because I'm very proud of the results, and I sent the peer review letter out. It's also on our website. Our peer review was performed the week of May 22nd. It covered the peer review period from July 1st, 2019 through June 30th, 2022. So it's a 3-year period. So every 3 years we have to have a peer review. Our next one would be for the period of July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2025. So we won't have to deal with anything until the fall of 2025 again. We had 2 people on site. One of them was from the city and county of Denver, the Denver Auditor's Office. They were an audit manager. And the other person that came on site was the Inspector General for the Maryland Capital Parks and Planning Commission. So, very different expertise, kind of more federal side and local government side. They performed our peer review. It was probably about 2 weeks of work for me, and then them being on site was another little bit of time. It takes a lot of prep to get them everything that they need. I hope you took some time to read our letter, but they looked at all of our processes. They looked at our policies and procedures. They looked at our staff credentials. They looked at our quality control system to make sure that we're putting out audits that are factual and accurate, and found that we are doing a really good job. We passed, and not only that, I'm very proud to say they didn't even have any verbal recommendations for us. They were really impressed with our audit software, our team's knowledge of the audit standards, and just the work we're doing and the quality of work we're doing. And I'm also helping one of them utilize our templates to build their processes out for their office. They liked them so much. So I'm really proud of the work the team did. It's a group effort, and we did a great job on that. So we're clear for 3 more years.
Well, and I think that's great. And Andrea has participated in reverse on at least one peer review audit where that's how we pay for part of this.
Yes. So
contribute her time.
Our requirement, we use ALGA, which is the Association of Local Government Auditors, and basically the other team members, the pool of peer reviewers donate their time, and the office just pays for travel. And so when you have a peer review come in, what you're asked to do is to pay, or to donate 2 people to a peer review, or to compensate for the labor side of it.
And these people are not a team. They hadn't even met each other.
They had never met each other.
Commissioner Schoonmaker and I went up there after our last meeting and met with them for a few minutes, and just to get a little insight from them. And they seemed to know what they were doing. And this is very good.
Yeah, we're very proud of it. And the total for our peer review was $4,100, a little over $4,100, which is very cost effective.
Can Ted get down to those kind of numbers?
Yeah,
maybe the letter.
And we have fulfilled our obligation now. I went on a peer review in April. That was our final one. I went to Fairfax County Schools they have a separate audit shop that handles their school system. Their school system is enormous, has about $1 billion budget, just their school system.
All right, well, let's move on if we're going to try to go to session after this. So,
any other news? Richard Pugh is participating in the Certified County Financial Officer program. Is scheduled to graduate in September. On our projects, due to peer review and those hotline cases, for my projects, I didn't quite get where I wanted them to be. So the payroll audit, it was a joint project with our previous payroll audit, so the file is one and the same in our audit software. And so I needed to not go in while the peer review team was here and make any changes, so it didn't look like I was changing the work on the work they were looking at. So I put a pause in that one. Coupon books and clerk and master probate are, CREs are in process. And those are in reporting. We're finalizing those up. Engineering, public
So
works.
will we know about that pretty soon, because that's been on here for a while?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Lori's following up with a few extra questions I had. That the coupon book process is very complicated, and there's no written procedures, so we're wanting to make sure
And
it's
the schools
accurate.
are aware y'all been communicating with
Yes,
them, and
yes.
vice versa. Okay, good.
Yeah. Engineering and public works, that one is in field work, and it's looking like the field work's going to be wrapping up toward the end of June, so hopefully there'll be draft reporting mid to late July on that one. And then the KSO non-seized inventory, that I can let Wendell talk about that one. Contract management, Lori is doing that one, and we originally were going to do just one contract, but as we started trying to gather more information about the contract management process and get our universe of contracts, we ended up having a lot of questions about how this process actually
Right.
works. And so what we decided to do was actually look at the process itself, because if we're going to pull contracts out of a process to individually look at, we want to make sure the process is sound first. And since we had so many questions and some concerns about just the process and how it works and who's responsible for it, we decided to look into the process first, and then after we get a handle on that, then we'll go look at individual contracts.
Well, I think the results of this could be pretty interesting. When do you think, where are we in being able to know
She's
more
in
about this?
planning. She's planning that. So, there's the contract process is very complicated, and it's if there's a certain dollar amount, it's one way, and if it's not, and then sometimes different groups are involved in it. So we're trying to make sure we have all of the groups, everyone involved, and we are trying to make sure we have a master list of what all
Right.
the roles and responsibilities
And I
are.
realize that can get pretty large on you, but
Yeah, it's a big one.
we've got a meeting in September. I don't know if you think you might be ready by then.
I don't think we'll be in reporting. I think we'll probably be in close to draft reporting and ending up field work then.
And I realize you can have other things that interrupt everything too. So.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'll let Wendell come talk about that. I will leave you all with this recommendation summary. The only thing that changed on it was the COOP date. That contract has been put in place there's a third-party contractor that's actually helping the county revamp the COOP planning, the continuity operations plan. And so once that, we now have a better date of when that contract will be completed, and the plan will be done, and everything will be rolled out. So that date is updated in there.
And we had an executive session meeting on that. Is there anything that we would need to go back to executive committee on that, or will this, once it's completed, give
I
us the
think as
answer?
we get closer to they start working the contract, and we can see which recommendations are being completed with the new COOP rollout. If we have any concerns, we could go to executive session to discuss kind of where we are in each of those
Okay.
recommendations.
All right.
Do y'all want a brief update on non-seized inventory?
I'd like to do the non-inventory real
Okay.
quick, because I know Wendell, it's been a year or two, worked on the other audit of the sheriff's department. I think that was
Thank you.
confiscated property, as I recall.
Wendell
Wasn't that
Morgan,
your-
Knox County Internal Audit. We started out with this scope on this review, if you recall from the engagement, that are taking a look at both the physical and the system controls related to firearms, ammunition, portable radios, and body armor, which would include a vest, including the armor plates within there, which have a 5-year date on them to sunrise. So we are through the process of understanding the systems. There's 3 different systems involved with this, these types of inventory. Primarily, they run through the training academy. We've been out there. We've looked at both the physical controls and the system controls related to that. And we're going to go back out there next week. We have our sample selected, in which we're going to take a look at the actual physical verification of those categories. And as we got through this, I added body cams and tasers, because it seemed efficient for us, while we had a group of personnel that we were going to be checking and kind of taking out of commission for that period of time, to go ahead and check that as well, in case for a more plethora of information related to their inventory. So Next week, we do the field work for that, the actual verification, and then the next time we meet in here, I'll have the results of that. So we did do the physical walkthrough and control set already, which would be 3 different locations where that inventory is located, some here, some at the training academy, and then some at the Fleet Services Center where the portable radios were kept. I've learned a lot through the process so far, and I think at the end of the report cycle, we'll have a good report for you guys.
Well, and it sounds like then they're being very cooperative with the audit.
Absolutely. They are, I've had no issue in the 2 times that I've been into that group. They've been exemplary as far as their communication and collaboration with me, and I've had, the biggest thing was sort of shoring up my understanding of what was going on and all the tentacles that I needed to touch to be able to, speak to this with some degree of competence.
Commissioner Schoonmaker?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do they designate equipment differently for the jail as opposed to the, say, law enforcement side?
So from what I can view, the database that I'm pulling the information from does not distinguish between the 2 types. So in other words, a personnel that works in the jail, not very many have firearms, but they were certainly included in my universe to pull from a sample perspective. So there are some that actually pulled out in the sample that I'll be verifying. Some of the, you see the Sally ports, so that some of the transportation folks involved with transporting inmates would have a sidearm as an example, and so they are included in the sample set.
Okay, thank you.
So it covers them all, just
Yes.
varies depending upon who would have what.
Yes.
All right, well, I appreciate any other questions?
The only other thing I would add about the COOP she spoke to a while ago is
yeah.
I am sitting on the implementation team. So as we have those findings that we had before and they're going through, I'll tell you the initial meeting was very promising. IEM was the contractor that was selected to walk them through that, and they were touching on all the points that we had basically had recommendations for. So it's a 24-month contract before it'll be fully implemented, and but I see all of the things that we anticipated would be in a good plan as part of their goal.
All right, Wendell, thanks a lot.
All right.
And Andrea, I think that covers all your items, right? So the item 9 is, and Mr. Schoonmaker, Commissioner Schoonmaker may have a comment on this. We have 2 remaining meetings left so far this year, September 18th and December 11th. And of course, we can schedule any special ones as we need to. There might be a question on whether or not it wants to be at 2 or someday other than Monday. And, Commissioner Schoonmaker, is that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Commission had previously looked at changing their meeting time to, say, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And it really impacted those employees those commissioners that had full-time jobs, because they were in turn having to take vacation time to be able to do that. And so that decision to move up the meetings for commission was rejected. And so the same thing holds true with our audit committee. We've got 3 members that are full-time employees that in essence have to take comp time or vacation time to attend our meetings. And there's no requirement that says the audit committee has to meet on the work session day at a 2 o'clock time period. I mean, we can meet on a on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday at, say, 4 o'clock or 4:30, whatever it is, whatever would accommodate the members of the audit committee better. So I would like, and I would appreciate some comments from my colleagues, but I think that we should try to move to a 4 o'clock time period and anything other than a work session or commission day.
I would back up Commissioner Schoonmaker with that and just say it's especially if it's a non-commission day, it's a lot easier at 4 than it is at 2, just because it's a day like today. It was tough. We had a presentation at 2 and then a 2-hour break and then this, or at noon and then this, and it gets harder and harder and harder. And my colleague and I are both at the same company, so I would
echo the support on that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with both Commissioner Jay and Commissioner Schoonmaker. I think one challenge, of course, will be the availability of this room if we want to meet in the main assembly room. Because as you get into the 4 and 5 o'clock time frames, there are, we might have to find another room to meet in if we do it 4 o'clock. But yeah, I agree. The long meeting dates.
And this is kind of interesting because we've
Take
had
your
a
time.
discussion before, and it may have been within the last year, and I think the logic at that time was if you got to be here, go ahead and get this one out of the way and not have to come back.
Yeah.
But
I
that
don't
was
disagree
really
with that
something
either.
the three of you all would talk about. Personally, I don't care really what day, what time, and I don't know if it matters to Matt either.
I like that 3 o'clock, 3:30 maybe.
Okay. Yeah.
Just from a childcare perspective, but that's more of a personal.
So what we're hearing is then, would you, if we do it a day other than the Mondays, unless Monday's a holiday, maybe 4 o'clock-ish is, and, because what I'll do is I'll just check with, and is there a day preference between Tuesday, Thursday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? Not Friday.
Mr. Chairman, one comment, if I can. I am out of town much of the week of September 18th on a peer review of all things. So I just wanted to throw that out. If the time change does not impact me at all, the date wouldn't impact me, but I would probably need to be Thursday that week or the following week if
Okay.
acceptable.
Well, I don't know, changing the 18th meeting is a different, kind of a different subject, other than it may tie into this anyway, because I guess it would be the next one if we can set it up. So I don't know, are you saying probably any time that week would be bad?
Well,
For
especially
you.
Tuesday or Wednesday would be bad that week.
Okay.
I can make it work by staying here Monday or being back
Because
Thursday.
again, it's a matter of, once we're not tying it to the Monday meeting week, because that's usually only, 2 Mondays out of the choices out of the month. I'll see what we can do for September, and I'll get with Drew and see what we can do. I'd like to get something that can be consistent, so we can give you a schedule ahead of time. Okay, so I don't think we need to take a vote on that, do we? I wouldn't think so either.
The small assembly room, Mr. Chairman, maybe, I don't know if there's anybody back there. We could maybe meet back there instead of having to run
Well,
upstairs.
I know, I guess I don't know what days the city has this room.
I don't know. We could just look and see.
We can check. It's just,
I'm just talking about today. Yeah, just.
okay. All right. So, I'll get back with y'all on that because we've got a little bit of time. Other business, I don't have any. Does anybody else have any? And if not, let's go to, sometimes I would have been a little more specific on item 11 to give you a little more guidance as to which subject on here we were talking about. But if we can meet on this, I've mentioned several times in past meetings, I'd like to have a really special session just on, executive session, just on hotline items. So to give you all an idea, as Andrew is going along, what's coming up, because there's some now that are kind of in between things that weren't even the two we're talking about. So, I don't know if, usually we've tried to get an office upstairs. I know Law Director Boog's been a little cautious about using this room because people can just walk in and, ideally the rules leave, everybody clears out of here and we stay here. And we can't have recording or videoing of it or, no minutes taken. So, I don't know what the easiest assumption is. I realize we were just talking about this before we take a vote on it, but the other option is, I don't know if that mayor's conference room is available, Andrea, if you could, I don't know if you'd have any idea.
Chris said it's available.
Huh?
Chris said the mayor's conference room is available.
Well, let's adjourn. Let's have
Okay.
a vote.
All right, so we need to have a motion and then a second, and, well, let's have a motion about this.
Motion to go into executive session for the discussion.
Do we have any discussion on that? Is there a second? All right, so we've got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Those opposed? And since there's none, I don't think we need to do a voice vote or a person-by-person vote. With that, we will adjourn this meeting and continue upstairs, and the people who should be involved in this are, of course, yes, but I'm going to decide in here who's going to attend, who's going to be there. Andrea's got to be there. I would assume Chris needs to be there. Anybody else outside of, do we need Ted, or would we rather him not know? Okay, Ted's not supposed to. And
Ted's aware
move.
of one issue. The other one doesn't have any financial statement impact, so I will leave that up to him.
I
if he
didn't hear
wants.
what you said. The first part.
Ted's aware of one of the discussion items. The other one didn't have a financial statement impact, so.
Well,
we-
right now, let's
it's
not
up-
have him
But,
in,
so it's up to him.
So we've decided that now, and so with that, motion to adjourn, and a second? We're adjourned.